Well, after the resounding success working on all the wiring last episode, we're going to try and carry on that momentum and do a bit more work up here in the mess that is our dashboard, especially around the brake and clutch pedal sensors, which do plug in to some of the cable connectors that we identified last episode. So we want to get those done before we forget how it all went together. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell, and preemptively like the video, because the #1 question I keep getting asked is, when is it going to run? And we are making some pretty big progress towards getting the ECU working, which you're going to love. It's been a good few years since you last saw these two actuators. This is the brake pedal sensor and the clutch pedal sensor, and these plug into these two connectors here, which run off to the lighting circuit in the ECU to tell the ECU to kill cruise control when you press either pedal, and obviously to turn on the brake lights. Now, there's a decent chance that the clutch pedal sensor isn't actually very important anymore. As far as we can tell, the only purpose it has is to disarm cruise. Obviously, if you press the clutch pedal, you want to disarm your cruise control so that the engine doesn't go, oh, I'm losing speed, and apply more throttle and rev it out to the red line. Brake pedal switch is obviously more important because we do need to keep the brake lights working, understandably. But just in case we're wrong on the clutch pedal, we are going to mount both of them. Now, we've prepared for this a little bit. It's been so long that I'd forgot we'd even done this. But on both of the pedals down at the bottom, we do have little metal like armatures and stuff to press the plungers on both of these switches. So a lot of the work down there has already been done. But before we go and close this in anymore and make our lives even more difficult than we already have, we're going to try and get these mounted properly onto the body so that they work and we can connect them into the ECU. We've done a lot of the design work for the brake pedal switch holder already, so that roughly fits on here like this, except because I'm really, really clever, I didn't measure the dimensions properly. It doesn't actually fit through the bore, which means we can't mount it up to the panel because it doesn't fit as flush into there as we wanted. And we're still not entirely sure how we're going to do the one for the clutch, because the sensor itself is a very, very different installation pattern. It's a very different shape, and also the sort of cavity that it's installed into isn't the same shape as the one for the brakes. We do have a bit more design ahead of us, but we're going to try and get these mocked up, try and get this design changed and reprinted as a new piece, and get this all together. So step 0 for today, nice and simple, but probably kind of a pain, is figuring out where exactly our heads were when we put this together, where we expect it to go and how we expect it to install it. The problem is, this goes all the way down in the bottom there, underneath all of this nonsense that two idiots have put together in the car without thinking about the simple things that we should have done a long time ago. So now looking down in the pedal box, you can see the modifications we made a few years ago to operate these two switches. On the brake pedal here, we've got a little lever with a little hole in the end of it that fits over the pin on the brake pedal sensor. And on the clutch pedal, we've got something a little bit more simple just because we're more short on room. There's a little pad just coming out the side that the pin from the sensor just presses up on the back of. So when we press the pedal in, that moves back and operates the switch. And obviously something similar happening on the brake pedal. So I'm down here in what is definitely not the most comfortable part of the car, in what is also definitely not my most comfortable relaxing position. But I've been mocking up the brake pedal switch here to see how it fits and whether the bracket that we had was ever going to be any good. Now, this was designed with the current shape of the pedal box and everything, but I don't think we ever did like a proper fitment test, which, given how horrible this is not a huge surprise. So I've had it in place now, and as far as we can tell, our best move is to have nothing at all in between this face of the switch and the inboard wall of the pedal box enclosure, whereas on this mount, we've actually got this bottom wall there, goes in between, so we don't really want that. And we also want about 1 centimetre or so of spacing on the bottom, which in fairness is roughly what we have on this, although probably a little bit more with these big mounting lugs. So we're going to tweak the design around a little bit tonight and hopefully get that printed and ready to go in tomorrow. But roughly speaking, this is the sort of angle and orientation that it's going to go in. So we're going to have it this way up, the cable coming out the outboard side on the right, and then hopefully just sort of hooping up past all the accelerator sensor and everything. And this should be relatively simple, I hope. Not that there's a lot I can demonstrate here. Now, we haven't done any work on designing around the clutch pedal switch yet, and hopefully this one should be even simpler than the brake one. This is going to go directly onto the side of the pedal box enclosure with the connector on the top. It's going to be angled down a little bit just because we've got the sidewalls of the pedal box itself cutting up around here. So we do have a bit of a clearance issue that we've got to just lean it a little bit to clear. But the pedal travel is just about right for the amount of piston throw on here. So this all seems like it should work. It's almost like we've thought about this before.
Now, long-time viewers will know we bought this E46 centre vent, and it has a very large opening on the back, about 100 by 50, and we need to join it onto a 50mm pipe. So this obviously doesn't work without at least some leakage, and when the valves are closed, it would just blow the air back out the dashboard, warm it up, and we wouldn't be able to control anything. So what we need to do is make an adapter from this to this. We made a test piece, which definitely didn't turn out the way I designed it, but did validate what we needed, that the printed design, the outlet, or the inlet, in fact, into the adapter from the pipe, fits perfectly over the top, and we can clamp that in. And the pocket that I'd made in this side was a little bit too tight on the tolerance. It fits in one direction, but it doesn't fit particularly well. So moving the tolerances out a little bit, we printed a new one. So prototype, and that is the finished article. It fits really nicely on there. The foam just seals it up beautifully, and the pipe fits onto the back from the heater. Now, using this solves a number of problems. It has obviously independent control, so we need to buy fewer valves, and it has the temperature control, which on the BMW this came out of just controls these two vents, but it has a Bowden tube operator lever on the back here, so we can run this in, and this will just control the thermostat for our entire heater box. So that's one piece that we need to do, and the other one for the dashboard to get done, we need a vent to demist. So I've printed up, well no, I've designed and had this printed by one of our patrons, Jess, thank you very much, and this fits nicely on with a valve. This is the only one we actually do need a valve for, because the center vent in the floor is also independently controlled, so we don't need a valve. So we have one valve which will be operated by another Bowden just on here. On the other end of the valve, we have a little adapter, and once again, the hose just plugs in. And in terms of doing the dashboard and getting all of that framework in, these are the key points that we've needed to do, because we need to integrate this into the dashboard top so that we can get that all fitted, we can make sure it fits properly, get it to all the pipe work in, so that we can work out where the fixings for those dashboard panels need to go. So let's go and take a look at that.
Unfortunately, the last few hours haven't been quite as productive as we hoped. We thought we were going to move on to the heater and getting all the, you know, the fan hoses and everything plumbed in and get this all working. Unfortunately, we did kind of get screwed by the Bowden cable that we were hoping to use to actuate our water valve. So in the middle of the E39 vents that we've got here, we've got this little heater control, and we were hoping to rig up a Bowden to control the water flow that would let us control the heat coming out the system. Unfortunately, the Bowden that we use has two problems. One, it's a spring steel, a single piece of spring steel all the way down it, which means it's not very flexible. It doesn't like being bent and straightened. And two, it's too short. And that meant that it's got some quite tight radii as it tries to come around from the valve here, around this way, and into the control. And between the tight radiuses and the straight sections, and it being a solid spring steel core, means that as you're moving it through, as you're moving like the moving part of the Bowden through the outer, parts of it have to like bend and straighten, and it puts a huge amount of strain on our little rotary here, which it just wasn't happy with at all. We couldn't get the thing to actually operate at all well. So we've put that on hold for now. We're going to order a longer Bowden that we can put a much wider, smoother radius in. That should be a lot happier than what we have now. And we've decided that we're just going to run the air hoses in and make sure we can at least start making some progress on that. Because the nice thing with the 1 meter Bowden, because it can go quite a long way around, we can kind of put it wherever it has to be to not get in the way. So, onto the air hoses. We've got the 3D printed adapter here that we're going to use on the back of the E39 vents. That takes our air hose, I think it's 50mm or whatever the size is. That's the wrong one. I'm going to put that on there. And we've plumbed in two air hoses on the other side of the heater. One of them is going to come over here this way. The other one that's attached to the bottom outlet is going to come up this way and feed into the windscreen vent that Adrian's currently gluing together. Unfortunately, our glue's a bit iffy, so it's not really setting very well. So he's been there for quite a while. He's making some very unhappy faces at it. But it is getting there slowly. And now we can start cutting up the other two hoses that we're going to need for the floor vent here and for the driver's side vent in the center. So skipping ahead just a little bit, we've done a quick sanity check to make sure that the dashboard covers do fit over everything we've added in here. And as you can see, they do. So we're going to have to cut out the hole here for the windscreen vent, but everything else here is kind of ready to go. We can lock this down more or less whenever we want. Now, if I just pop it back out the way again, undoing a decent minute's work of aligning it, you can see under here we've got all of our hoses in place. So the layout here might look a little bit goofy, but given the constraints we've got, it's actually kind of the best we can do. So the heater box that we've got has 2 outlets out each side. They do make one that has 4 outlets all up out one side, which you could call the top. The problem is then the water hoses end up in a goofy place, and that was never going to work. So we've taken this one, made it work pretty well, I think. So out of the passenger side on there, we've got one hose hooping all the way back over and coming into our passenger side face vent. And this is the only hose that we can really fit in the top here. If the wiring was sat somewhere different, we might be able to fit both, but the wiring's difficult to move because there's not really much slack left in the loom, so that's staying put. The other outlet on the passenger side is coming all the way around and feeding the windscreen vent, and that's having to come around the front because the water hoses are coming around the top, so we can't like short circuit it over the top here. And to be honest, even if we did, it'd probably end up running into this one. And out of the driver side of the heater matrix, we've got one hose coming straight across into our footwell vent, which I think you probably can't see from up there, but we have talked about a few times. This is another little double vent that just fires down towards our feet to get a bit of heat down in there. And finally, we've got the driver side face vent hooked onto a little kind of S-shaped piece that's going down to the bottom vent on there. So yeah, we've discovered through doing this that ventilation hoses get all sorts of weird shapes, which in fairness, I kind of knew already from having pulled the ventilation system on the Rover apart. But even on something as simple as this, it's quite astonishing how much space it can all take up.
So now we've got the slot located, cut out, and it all fits nicely with the vent. We need to build some means to hold the vent in place because we don't want it flopping around. We don't want to drill holes through the side of this to hold it in. Ideally, we just want it to kind of get clamped onto the bottom of this panel so that when you lift it up, you can disconnect the vent and this whole thing comes off with. But crucially, this isn't permanently attached to this panel either. So that's why we don't want to screw into it. We just want it held in place with a bunch of panels. So that's why I cut this little flap at the very front edge, which locates the panel, which locates the vent piece in nice and secure, and it's at an angle so that this is completely flush top and bottom. So for the last 20 minutes or so I've been making this little panel up which will attach onto the edge. Now we can't put a panel on all of the edges because we wouldn't be able to remove this from it, but we can secure it on 2 edges like that, and this is just going to get riveted through and that will hold it in pretty well once this is attached. So I'm going to get that riveted on and then work out some means that we can make a removable piece that will hold it on this side and give it a bit more security. This one has lips top and bottom, so when it sits on the vent panel, it fits nice and securely in, and I think actually if I hold onto that, that doesn't move down, and basically it notches up and fits quite nicely like that. Just made a quick adjustment to this where it joins the flap that I've cut out of the panel. So I put this back on again, make sure that fits nicely, and then from the underside I need to make sure that the vent is aligned properly with the slot that we cut, which that feels like it's in the right place there. And as long as this fits in properly like that, I can put the holes in and rivet this in place. So now, this should just be able to fit in like that, and it holds itself up. I'm not sure that was worth the entire hour that it's taken me to deal with this, but I'm pleased that it's now working properly. So now what we need to do is make something that is removable, that will go on this side and hold it in place. Though the more I look at it, I'm actually not sure we do. Like, that does hold in really quite nicely, just as is. Small change of plan. We're not going to screw this in place, we are actually going to rivet it, but we're going to do it in a way that we only need to drill out one rivet, and it'll be one of the ones we have lots of, so that we can remove this when we need it. This is not something we're going to have to take off frequently. I really hope this is not going to be something we have to take off frequently. So I've made a little retaining strap that sits over the top, just down there, and then rivets in on this side, and that holds this completely rigid onto this panel, so that will work perfectly for what we need. And as I say, hopefully this won't need to be taken off. If it does, something has obviously gone very, very wrong. So that rivet's still a little bit long as well, but as you can see, this is now mounted pretty securely onto the panel. It does need a little bit of foam underneath the edge, but we'll put that on when we cover the rest of this as well, so that'll be the only time this should hopefully come off. And just a couple of little tweaks, and that fits really, really well. I am extremely happy with how that fits, even with that being loose on that side, because again, don't want to really rivet through there because it'll start interfering with that, it'll be a pain. We can now put this back on the car. We need to secure the dash panel down somehow, and with this tucked in under here, that's all we've been doing for the time being. We've just been tucking the front edge underneath the windscreen surround, and the back's just kind of sat roughly in the right position, but obviously we need to get this secured properly down in place. Now we've got some ribs that run across the underside, which give it its shape and kind of support it in the middle. There's one about here, and one right on the edge of the driver's instrument panel, which runs right underneath this seam. So in order to try and connect this all up, the plan is to use these little clips. Apparently these are called Terry clips. They are just a bent piece of steel. They go around and they clip onto rods, I guess cables, pipes, anything that is round, and it just fits in nice enough. There's a hole in the back, so we'll be just pop riveting it onto the underside of here and holding them in place. And the downside is these are designed for a 12mm conduit, connector, whatever, pipe, and these rods, the ribs that we have under here, are only 10mm. So we're cheating slightly and adding a bit of gaffer tape and a bit of LX, and I'm hoping that that will provide enough support to hold at least the middle part down. If we need to add a little bit more support on this end, we can do that just coming onto the front frame as it runs around on the edge. But I'm hoping, at least as a start, that these are going to be enough. Definitely holds down, but I think the spring in this end of the panel is going to be a little bit too much for it to overcome on its own, and it actually seems, yes, the pop rivet is a little bit too long to fit down, and that's holding it up off the top of here. So try a different pop rivet and we'll see where we get to. Now, a slight change of plan on this panel. We've actually decided to rivet this in. With the amount of access we have through this panel down underneath and through the pocket on the driver's side to get into all the wiring, plus there's going to be an enormous cover of sort of pop-off panel on the front where all of the relays and fuses is. I actually don't think we're going to need to take this one off very often at all, at least compared to this one, if we need to get in to do anything with the heat matrix, the fan units, anything like that. So decision made, this one is riveted to the car, and this one should now fit on top, since we've taken so many little bits off and tweaked the shape of it in a number of places. Now, we have lost one of the clips. It broke off, but I think that was probably inevitable given how much we've been fighting this around and knocking it and bending it back and forth. We've also clearanced and left a 1/4 inch, so ½ centimetre give or take, between these two panels, because we have to cover these in foam and material. This is hanging over the front slightly, so we can wrap that around, do all of this, and this will fit in really nicely. Now, the only thing we're going to have to do is add a little mechanical fastening at this end to hold it in place, but I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem, because we're going to have a small control in the gap between the vent and the dash anyway, which hopefully we'll just be able to pop out and get in to release it. Alternately, I'm going to try and make a little spring catch which will sit underneath it that will hold it in place. I know we're not going to be able to use these Terry clips to hold that in, just because the support is too far across towards the side where to the driver's side and supporting the side of the instrument cluster. So that's not going to work. We just need something else to hold it in. The other option is we just weld in a little stub, and then we can use a Terry clip exactly the same as we have over here, because these work really, really well now we've put a bit of tape around them. So if you'd like to help us buy more terry clips, well, maybe we don't actually need more terry clips, but we are going to need more rivets because this panel has to come back off so that we can finish up doing the wiring. You can support us at patreon.com/pedalbox show. If you support us there from as little as $1 a month, you will also get discount at shop.pedalbox.show, where you can buy this wonderful merch. Actually, you can't buy this t-shirt, but you can buy one very, very similar to it. And if you haven't already, do make sure you've subscribed to the channel, hit the little bell, liked, and let us know what you think of our dashboard in the comments below. And we will see you in the next episode.
And now finally I can get out of here, which is, oh, what a relief. Oh, my back's the right shape again. Ish. Oi.
So put the roof on next, yeah?
Yeah.